real pleasure to be here. Thank you. I want to quote to you, just to start with, from Mother Teresa, who is a nun working in Calcutta, in India, one of the poorest parts of India, with some of the poorest people in the world. And she said this: "Charity, to be fruitful, must cost us. To love, it is necessary to give. To give, it is necessary to be free from selfishness." Okay? So let's just listen to that again. Charity, to be fruitful, must cost us. To love, it is necessary to give. To give, it is necessary to be free from selfishness. And that one word, free, I want to pick up later on, because freedom is about liberation. And we as educationalists believe that we're here to educate people in order to liberate them from the lives that they would have had they not got access to education. And those of us working in healthcare as health professionals also believe that to bring healing to people is to liberate them. Yeah? And what one of the greatest people of all time surely has to be Nelson Mandela, who wrote a lot about freedom. He wrote a lot about the struggle for freedom. He wrote a lot about how forgiveness is an essential part of freedom. And as an oppressed person, imprisoned for his beliefs and imprisoned for his political struggles, he found the answer to forgiveness for him was to recognize and appreciate the oppressive forces that were binding his captors, that were binding his prison guards. And I think whatever we do now through Ganera, whatever we do in terms of Wisdom Legacy, has to liberate people, has to free people from the lives that hem them in, the lives that restrict them. Poverty drags people down. So many children in this continent are born simply to die because they're completely and totally trapped by poverty. And one of the things that I learned that you are trying to do through your organization is to liberate people through sharing, through giving, through loving. And so we're going to talk a little bit about selfish or selflessness. And I wonder whether it's a spectrum that, you can either be selfish or you can be selfless. I wonder whether they're exclusive in that way, or whether you can say, oh, I'm a little bit selfish, I'm a little bit selfish, I'm kind of in the middle. I wonder whether the two are exclusive. So let's just explore the term selflessness. Because perhaps one of the things that we have to do in order to give is to be a little bit selfish, and I'll explain what I mean by that. Because unless you look after yourself, you can't look after other people. Unless you love yourself, you can't love other people. Unless you accept yourself for who you are, you can't accept other people for who they are. Yeah? And self is an important concept. Self is about identity. How you see yourself is important, because how you see yourself governs how you behave and how you interact with other people. If you're ashamed of yourself, if you carry guilt, then you're much less likely to be able to interact with other people. You're much less likely to be able to forgive other people or to help them see through their guilt or their shame. The way we see ourselves, our identities, are crucially important in terms of whether we can give and whether we can share with other people. But of course, the whole concept of self is really important to those of us who work in healthcare, because if it weren't for self-care and promoting self-care, the health service would be overcome with the burden of demands from patients. We need people to take care of themselves, to look after their own health, and when they get minor symptoms, to deal with those symptoms themselves. We talk about self-discipline, very positive things about self. We talk in education about self-directed learning. You take responsibility for your own learning and your own education, with the guidance of people like myself, perhaps. So this exclusiveness between selfishness and selflessness is something that we need to discuss. I'm not sure that they are totally exclusive. If you're totally selfless and you keep giving and giving and giving, then you get worn out. You get burnt out. And the people that you love the most in your life, whether it's your husband, your wife, your partner, your children, your parents, are the ones who suffer. And I'm not sure that that's a very good thing to arrive at, if indeed you're trying to be selfless. So in order to be selfless, you need to focus on self. You need to know who you are, know where you've come from, know where you're going, know what you want in life, know how you see yourself, to be at one with yourself before you can go on and help other people. And the way in which we identify is really important. Selfless. What about less? How can we be less of self? Because to be totally selfish is to be absolutely and totally obsessed with yourself. I am the center of the universe. I am the center of the world. Everything revolves around me. I want as much as I can get. And to be less of self is to shake off all those things that make our lives complicated. In fashion terms, there's an important movement called less is more. In architecture, there's an important movement called less is more, which is really about minimalism, which is about appreciating simplicity. And perhaps one of the solutions for us in terms of giving is to try and find simplicity about the things that we might do in order to make other people's lives better. To throw off some of the things that complicate our lives, some of the rubbish that stops us from seeing the things that are important. So there's something very important about the less part of being selfless. And then you've got the selflessness. What about this ness term? Well, this ness term describes a state of being. So it says that it's the state of being selfless, of being less obsessed with yourself. And that notion of state of being is really important because it's about what we want to be like. It's not a temporary thing. It's a permanent thing. So it's like taking on the habit of being selfless. The habit of being selfless. Have you all taken on the habit of being selfless? Or are you still stuck somewhere between, I'm a little bit selfish, I'm a little bit selfish, I don't know. And you're kind of hovering in the middle. Now remember that you need to look after yourself. But that's different to being selfish, which is a very negative thing. It begins to gnaw away at you. It begins to make you a kind of inward-looking, angry, nasty person. And you all know, you can all recognise people around you who are selfish people. Have you ever played that children's party game called Pass the Parcel? Do you know the party game Pass the Parcel? Yeah? Does anybody know it? It's a party game that children play in Europe and in North America. And what it is you find a prize, you find a present, and then you wrap it up maybe 20 times. Yeah? And then you sit all the children in a ring, and then you play some music. And you get the children to pass the parcel from one person to the next, and they keep passing it on until the music stops. And then the person who's got the parcel when the music stops gets to take one layer of paper off. And you don't know how many layers of paper there are, so you don't know if you are the child who's going to get the prize. But you also have to pass it on. You have to keep passing the parcel on. And I think the wisdom legacy that you guys are trying to achieve is a little bit like Pass the Parcel. Maybe we should get a feel on it. I want to win the prize. What is the prize? Well, for Christians it would be articulated in other ways. But what is the prize? What is it you're trying to achieve as a group of people in and through this forum here is to pass on your experience, to pass on the way in which you try to make sense of his life better. Is that right? Yeah. So let's think about some legacy planning for Rwanda. Let's do some legacy planning for Rwanda. What sort of place do you want Rwanda to be in 20 years' time?
Like everyone is socially responsible. That's what I want.
Where everyone is socially responsible. And we were going to talk a little bit today about social responsibility and what that might mean. What do you want Rwanda? What sort of place do you want Rwanda to be in 20 years' time?
A country where every person is secure.
A country where everybody has security,
Yeah.
so they feel safe. And you can't feel safe if you're living in dire poverty.
Yes.
But when you want to buy something, you can get it. When you are economically empowered.
Okay, so where people are economically empowered, and we'll talk a little bit about that word in a moment. The city planning. You map out what sort of place you want Rwanda to be in 20 years' time. And we could get something different from each of you. Okay, so for your organisation, in order to be in that place, in order to be, for Rwanda to be the kind of country that you describe in 20 years' time, what do you need to have achieved as an organisation in 15 years' time? Okay? And in order to be at that place in 15 years' time, what do you as an organisation need to have achieved in 10 years' time? And you spend some time just discussing and debating what you need to have achieved in 10 years' time in order for Rwanda to be the kind of amazing place that you describe in 20 years' time. And then I say, okay, in order to be there in 10 years' time, where do you need to be in 5 years' time? And in order to be at that place in 5 years' time, what do you need to do now? Because you could go on discussing the important issues around security and poverty for the next 20 years. But I think you as a group are most interested in what you can do to actually make a real difference. Through actions, through deeds. I have a particular faith perspective that is that's a Christian faith, and I belong to a particular movement in the Christian faith called Methodism. And Methodism really came out of the Anglican Church about 300 years ago, where people started to be much more methodical about what they did, much more methodical about saying, these are the words in the gospel. We've got to do something about them. We've got to enact them. And so thus, Methodists are often called people who seek a social gospel. A gospel that calls people to realize the kingdom of God in the here and now. The kingdom of God is a place where people feel secure, where people are equal, where people get a share of God's riches and God's goodness. And there's one particular hymn that talks about the development of an individual as their relationship with a God, with their God, grows. And the last line of the first verse goes something like, some of self and is all of self and none of thee. And as the relationship grows, the last line of the second verse is some of self and some of thee. As the relationship grows, the last line of the third verse is less of self and more of thee. And as the relationship grows, the last line of the fourth verse is none of self and all of thee. And for those people who have particular faith perspectives, perhaps this spectrum, this transition from selfish to selflessness involves a growing relationship with your Maker, with your God, in terms of making sense of the words in your scripture, whether it's the Quran or the Gospel. And I think that these sacred texts offer a lot in terms of action. Questions, fundamental questions like, who is my neighbour? Who is my neighbour? Who is my brother? Who is my sister? Can we truly be brothers? Yeah, it goes without saying. And what's our responsibility to our brothers and our sisters and our neighbours? To be thankful for what we have and to give thanks for what we have. And as part of to share with others. But let's just look for a moment at this word empowerment, or our economically empowered. And one of the things that I think you're trying to achieve, having read this, is really to achieve empowerment. And we all know what empowerment means. In fact, we throw the word around. Does empowerment mean to share power, to give people some of our power, to devolve power? Well, empowerment doesn't really translate into kinder or under. Or if it did, the word empowerment would become a word like this. It doesn't really translate into many other languages at all. It doesn't translate into Keys. It doesn't translate into French very well. It doesn't translate into German very well. And interestingly, it translates to help us understand what empowerment means. Because in Scandinavian, the word empowerment is represented as two words. What are the things that oppress people? Poverty, ill health, physical ill health, mental. The way in which our society doesn't create physical structures so that people who have physical disabilities. We oppress people because of prejudice. Because of prejudice, because you're different from me. We oppress people because they look different. In North America, in healthcare, the most oppressed group of people, according to a recent survey of doctors in North America, the group of people for whom doctors have the most prejudice are fat people, obese people. doctors say, don't like fat people. They have no willpower. It's hopeless giving them dietary advice because they fail all the time. 10 years ago, the most oppressed group of people were alcoholics or drug addicts. Because again, they were hopeless, they were useless. Once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. Why should I waste time with these people? They'll never get better. They'll never change their ways. And it's those kinds of assumptions and prejudices that oppress people, that stop people from becoming the very sorts of people that we would want them to become. People who feel safe and secure, people who are economically empowered, people who are dignified, who achieve dignity, who send their children to school, who take pride in their children's success at school. And in East Africa, there's a major political problem with the most oppressed group of people in this region. Lesbian and gay people, who are the most oppressed group of people currently politically. And we make all sorts of assumptions about people that we oppress, because they're different, because we can mock them, because we can laugh at them. And that makes us feel better. If we empower people, we truly remove those things that oppress them, including assumptions and prejudices. Some of the people that I work with in the area of the country where I used to work were some of the smelliest, dirtiest people in the world, and my colleagues would say, I can hardly bear to have them in the same room, they smell so much. And I used to say, do you know how I cope with that? I stare right at them and I say in my head over and over again, I love you, I love you, I love you. Because they're a human being. And the minute I start fanning my face with my papers, or I start spraying deodorant spray around, I begin to oppress them. I begin to heap shame on them. To empower people is to remove those things that oppress them, and we start with our prejudices and our assumptions. You guys are interested in responsible citizenship, in social responsibility, what it means to be a responsible citizen. Responsibility, I believe, has the same meaning as accountability. How do you account for your actions? As a neighbour, as a brother, as a sister, as a professional, as a healthcare professional? What does it mean to be socially responsible? I think we do it much better in this country than a lot of other countries. I think because we value community service. Everybody gets involved in community service. Just before Christmas, I went up to the returnee camp for our brothers and sisters returning from Tanzania, where I saw some of the most beautiful encounters between students from former KHI and staff from former KHI as they served the people in that camp. People who had absolutely nothing. They sat and they listened and they touched and they held hands and they gave. They served the people they encountered. I think we do it much better here. But I think we need to value it. And it is valued politically. We need to make sure we value it in the University of Rwanda. We need to make sure that we define the success of our graduates, not just in the marks they achieve in their final exams and their end-of-year exams or their end-of-semester exams. And we say, gosh, you're a really good student because you got really high marks, but we have to make sure that we say, you did really well. You did really well because you served other people. We need to create time and space and funds for people like yourselves who study and work in our institutions, who have a real mission to serve other people and say, look, we have talents, we have things we can offer. Please help us to do those things. Please value those things. The University of Rwanda, as part of its mission, has the desire to produce graduates who can solve the problems of the people of this country. I think you're already beginning to do that. I think we need to make sure that we reinforce and consolidate this culture of giving back all the time. I think that your forum is about developing that culture of giving back. We're incredibly fortunate. We're incredibly fortunate that we can meet together in this room today. All sorts of reasons that mean that we can meet together in this room. All sorts of reasons why we're incredibly fortunate to come together. About a woman who poured expensive perfume on the head of Jesus. And the men in the room said, "You stupid woman." And just tells you something about the role of women 2,000 years ago. You stupid women pouring such expensive perfume. The amount of money that perfume cost was equivalent to a labourer's wages for an entire year. And you just wasted it. And Jesus said, leave her alone, for what she's done will always be told in her memory. And the lovely thing about the story of that woman is that you can't actually recall the lovely thing, the great thing that she did, without recalling the name of Jesus Christ. And for those people with a faith perspective in the room, maybe people will say, you know, that person gave because they were a believer. That person gave because they believed in the Lord. But the other thing that Jesus said in scolding the men who said, you stupid woman, and that's an incredibly impressive thing to say, is he said, the poor you'll always have with you. And that was a reflection back to something that was written in the Old Testament in Deuteronomy. The line, the poor you'll always have with you. But 5 verses before that are the words, you will no longer have the poor with you. You will no longer have the poor, and the poor you'll always have with you. And the reason in 5 short verses we find the contradiction is that we will always have the poor with us because our structures, our political and social structures are flawed. Because we are inherently selfish as individuals and as a group of people. And we allow our structures, our world trade rules, to keep some people poor while allowing other people to be rich. So we'll always have poor people with us. But you're trying to do something to address that. I think you need to remember your history. The story that Jean de Moore tells on the Ganira website. I think you need never to lose sight of this. You never need to lose sight of that spark which started the conversation with this group of friends that created this forum. And you need to make sure that that spark turns into a flame of hope for this nation and some of the poorest people in this nation. I don't know if any of you know the song Beauty for Brokenness. Does anybody know the song Beauty for Brokenness? I'll not get you to sing it, but here's words from the song. Come change our love from a spark to a flame. And you know, we justify all sorts of reasons why our spark, the spark that is Ganira Forum, doesn't become a flame. We justify all sorts of things. There's another song that has a verse in it that goes something like, we televise the dying, salve our consciences by sighing, life's unfair, as if you were not there. We televise the day, we watch some of the poorest, sickest people in the world on our television screens, in documentaries, in news reports, and we go, it's sad, isn't it? We salve our consciences by saying life's unfair, and then we get on with our lives. And I think what you're trying to do is to say, no more will we salve our consciences by saying life's unfair, but we're actually going to do something about it. I want to come back to the word that Mother Teresa used when she talked about, in order to give, you need to be free. In order to love, you need to be free. And to pick up on that notion of liberation, to pick up on that notion of empowerment. To give is to liberate people. And so I leave you with some more words of a song. And some of you who study where I work will have heard these words, but I think you might have forgotten them already. It's difficult to remember words that people trot out, that people speak. But some years ago, one of my medical students in Glasgow came to see me and said, you know, I want to be a singer. And I've got a recording contract, but the head of the university won't let me. And I listened to her story and I said, you've got to be a singer. You've got to go and be a singer. And she was very close to finishing her medical degree. And I said, you've got to go. And she said, but I'm not allowed to go. And I said, you've got to go. Just go. She said, I'll get into trouble. I said, no you won't. You go, I'll get into trouble. She went, I got into trouble. In 2012, she became the fastest selling recording artist of all time. Her album outsold the Beatles faster than any Beatles album. She sang at the opening and closing ceremony of the Olympic Games. And she sang a song that she used to play as she wrote in the medical school. And she wrote these words. And I think these words are relevant to you guys. You've got the words to change a nation, but you're biting your tongue. You've spent a lifetime stuck in silence, afraid you'll say something wrong. If no one ever hears it, how are we going to learn your song? So come on, come on, come on, come on. You've got a heart as loud as lions, so why let your voice be tamed? Maybe we're a little different, there's no need to be ashamed. You've got the light to fight the shadows, so stop hiding it away. Come on, come on. I want to sing, I want to shout, I want to scream till the words dry out. So put it in all of the papers, I'm not afraid. They can read all about it. You guys have got a voice. You've got a heart as loud as lions. You've got words that need to be heard. You've got a real mission, you've got a real purpose. You want to do something to make this nation better by lifting people out of poverty through charity, through giving, through loving, and through trying to articulate social responsibility. And all that means for so many people in this country and in this region. So come on, shout about it, do something about it, because I want to read about it. I want to read about the wonderful, beautiful, amazing things that you do. I hope that we've spent a little bit of time trying to realize whether there is a spectrum between selfishness or selflessness. I think we have tried to share the fact that in order to be selfless, you need to, without being obsessed by self, you need to take care of yourself. You can only help other people if you're in a safe place yourself. But then to go on and just think about the things that drive us, the imperatives, the mission, why you want to go from this place, from this meeting, and do something to make a real difference. Now I know that we're going to spend a little bit of time just talking and sharing ideas. So if I hand back to you, you can then maybe coordinate a conversation.
Thank you for your attention, and let's again give a round of applause to Professor Philip for his constructive talk. Coming up on our agenda, it's question and answer. So feel free to ask any question, or if you have any comment about the talk, feel free. He's here to respond to your question or comment.
Thank you so much. My name is Jackson. I have a very small question, selfish. I will talk to someone. Sometimes I might be selfish, but I do not accept it. I say, I think I'm not. Resistant to that aspect of being selfish. If that happens, how can I help someone like that? What is the approach that I can use to approach a person like that? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. I also have a question about selfish. When do you think exactly you will start giving, releasing yourself from selfish? Because you give because you have. You can't give and you don't have. When do you feel that you have and you are able to give? Thank you.
I was going to ask if those are not characters, like being selfish. Oh, you said it's like an habit. An habit is something someone can work on it and change it. And sometimes I wonder, it's like a character. You can't change it. So how can you work on being selfish and selfless? Thank you very much.
Thank you. My name is Joseph. Before I joined this organization, one of asked me a challenging question that how are you going to start giving while you still need more, even for yourself and your relatives and your family. So I wonder how you can make a very good balance, which is in line with my colleague's question, when it is appropriate to give, because in our movement we believe that everyone can help. Another question was, especially in our context, we are coming in a region where we believe that everything we need to receive from outside for a developing country, and how could we also give to what you advise, so that also us can produce and share with the rest of the world. Thank you.
Regarding legacy planning, you mentioned how you need to have a map breakdown of 20, 15, 10, 5 years now. But how do you go about determining what to actually do, how to separate, where to begin, and what? Because you give good map for a plan, but how do you determine what things you actually have to do to implement the plan?
You have the answers to the questions. I don't have the answers to the questions. I can simply reflect on the comments and the questions. But you know what the answers are to all of these questions. I think the real challenge about how you deal with other people who you perceive to be selfish is a tough one in life. And you know, we all have people that we love dearly, but who are ever so slightly selfish. They're a bit obsessed with themselves. They have more to give away than we do, but they hold on to it. And maybe we can't do that much to influence them. Maybe we should just keep trying to live completely true lives ourselves. And that's what you're trying to do through Ganera Forum, I think, which is to role model the way. To say, this is one possible way forward, this is one possible way to make the lives of our fellow students slightly better. You may want to hold on to what you've got. You may want to store things up for the future. But I'm going to live my life in this way. One of the most important things about modelling the way is to be completely consistent and congruent in what you do. So when you say things, you do things that are congruent, you do things that match, otherwise it confuses people. And you're consistent. You stick to one straight path. And what you have in Rwanda, which is possibly the main reason why this nation is going to be successful, is that you have a completely consistent leader. So many countries in the developing world have been torn apart over 20, 30 years by the inconsistencies of one leader. Of a leader who blows hot and cold, of a leader who one moment proclaims something and the next moment proclaims something completely different. One moment is nice to everybody and the next moment is horrible to everybody. And what you have here is completely consistent leadership. And your future is one of the brightest futures for any nation in Africa. Rwanda models itself as the Singapore of Africa. In 20 years' time, it almost certainly will be the Singapore of Africa. No other country in the world has doubled its life expectancy over a 10-year period. No other country with the same development indices has achieved childhood vaccination rates that they have in Rwanda. No other country. And there are lots and lots of things to shout about, lots and lots of things to tell the rest of the world about. So there's a bright future, but we're part of that future. And we're not a charity case. In the university, we're no longer a charity case. We no longer sit and wait for people to come and deliver courses. We no longer wait for people to come and tell us how to write curricula or how to lecture. Why don't we? Because we've got the people who know how to do those things here. And they have been oppressed by all of the goodwill that's come our way. They've been stopped, they've been limited. And we're now saying to people, thank you very much for showing an interest in us. We want to work with you. But please don't come the dates that suit you. And please don't come and teach the things that teach you. Come when we want you to come and teach the things that we need you to teach. So things are changing. Things are changing massively. With regard to the legacy, part of it is envisioning. And good leaders are always good at creating a vision. But they soon become bad leaders, those good leaders, because they can't come up with a roadmap. They can't come up with a route map. They can't implement that vision. But you have to realize that vision first. And then you have to spend a lot of time in your legacy planning exercise in coming up with a way to effect those changes. You've already started your forum. You already raised money to sponsor students. You've already identified the fact that some students are so poor that they can't go home in the summer holidays because they have nowhere to go. You've already started to support those students. I have students who come into my office in tears because they fainted on patients in clinical placements, because they cannot afford to feed themselves, and they faint from starvation. Next week, I want to be in a situation where no student in the University of Rwanda faints on a patient because they're starving. So I think legacy planning is something you need to do. But I think it could take you at least an afternoon to sort out what's important for you as an organisation is to work out what your next step is going to be, what you want to achieve in a year from now. Little steps, little things make a big difference. People want fast results all the time. So they say, just let me do this, just agree with me, and we can get this done. It's not sustainable. We need to build trust. We need to build enduring relationships. And you do that by sharing a little bit of yourself. So you may not have much to give. You can smile at people, you can say hello, you can show a genuine interest in them, you can find out what it is that's troubling them.